situations. It's a very gentlemanly game. I'm not very gentlemanly, so that was hard to adjust to. It's still hard to adjust to. I want to hit people with my broom when I lose, and have a hard time, letting the winners buy me a beer. Like, let's just rub it in.
Welcome into the NFL on Fox podcast presented by Verizon. I'm Dave Helman. That other voice you just heard, that would be 4-time All-Pro, 5-time Pro Bowler, sack guy extraordinaire Jared Allen. Had a wonderful conversation with him. Yeah, we talked about curling, if you didn't catch that. The ice sport. Talked about that. Talked about his candidacy as a Pro Football Hall of Fame semifinalist. Plenty of other stuff in between. Stay tuned for a wonderful conversation with Jared Allen coming up in a few minutes. But let's start the show where we need to. Did you see that game on Monday night? Actually, let me rephrase. Did you see that finish on Monday night, week 15, once again coming to a close with a bang? The Seattle Seahawks stun the Philadelphia Eagles 20-17 up at Lumen Field with some literal last-minute heroics. Monday Night Football continuing to deliver the goods. 7 straight weeks that the underdog has gotten a shocking win, and none more entertaining than this finish for the Seattle Seahawks, sending Philadelphia to a 3rd straight loss. But as I mentioned, it's all about how you finish, because let's be honest, not all games are great all the way through. Sometimes you're taking notes for a podcast. Maybe you're looking idly at your phone, counting the minutes, counting the hours until bedtime. I guess I'll see this thing through to the end. But this wasn't like a banger of a game for, I would say, 85% of it. This very much felt like a Philadelphia Eagles team that was trying to go up and get its season on track on a rainy night on the road and just say, all right, man, what do we got to do to meet the bare minimum threshold for a win? And I can't say I blame them. Again, 2 straight losses to 2 NFC rivals. Their quarterback, Jalen Hurts, is sick. He's sick enough that he made his own travel arrangements. The defense is banged up. Darius Slay had a surgery. They change out the D coordinator. Sean Desai essentially gets demoted. I get it. Get up to Seattle, get the win, get the hell out of there. And that's what it looked like. The Eagles looked like they were going to play ball control and just get out of here. 3 scoring drives of 12+ plays and 5+ minutes, grinding it out, classic Philadelphia style. The Eagles never led by more than 10 in this game, and most of the time it was 7 points or less. But the thing that made this game not all that compelling is the Seahawks have problems of their own. Geno Smith's been dealing with an injury right before kickoff. Drew Lock is revealed as the starter, and the offense at times looked like it was playing with a backup quarterback. Not only did Seattle punt 5 times on the night, all 5 of those possessions went 5 yards or less. With very few exceptions, this just wasn't an explosive offense. So even in a game that was 17-10, 17-13, never felt like it was in doubt. And even when the Eagles were forced to punt, they're up 17-13. They punt just before the 2-minute warning. It still felt like this was going to an unimpressive but foregone conclusion. Another sloppy Eagles win, but what else is new? They've been doing that all season long. They punt the ball just before the 2-minute warning. It's downed at the Seattle 8-yard line, and that's when you say, okay, I've barely seen the Seahawks string together anything tonight. You expect me to believe that they're going to pull off a 92-yard drive with the game on the line with 1.5 minutes to play? Well, you know the answer to that, don't you? And it's even more incredible because as the broadcast showed us, the Seahawks had just 2 touchdown drives of 80+ yards on the season. And that was with Geno Smith in the lineup. Felt over. And then Drew Lock got them out of their own red zone with 18 yards to DK Metcalf. And then he picks up a short little 6-yard completion, nothing fancy, but okay, they're moving the ball. And then it gets really interesting when DK gets the 34-yarder down the sideline to move it into Philly territory. DK Metcalf, 3 catches, 58 yards with the game on the line. And then, having moved into position, 30-something seconds to play, ball on the Philly 29-yard line. It's all there for you. Drew Lock uncorks a gorgeous go ball to Jackson Smith and Jigba. No safety help over the top. Perfect play call. It's Jackson Smith and Jigba's 3rd touchdown of the season. It's actually his 2nd touchdown of the season for the game-winning points inside the final minute. He did it against Cleveland too. All-time moment at Lumen Field up in Seattle. And that is saying a lot. When you think about the memories that have been made there during the Pete Carroll era specifically, I'm not saying it's better than Richard Sherman in the NFC title game. I'm not saying it's better than Jermaine Kearse in the next NFC title game. I get it. There have been some all-timers up there. As far as regular season wins go, it's right up there at the top. Julian Love gets his 2nd interception of Jalen Hurts to kill this thing off in the final seconds. Woo! Not going to say what a game, but what a finish. Clearly, I'm still buzzing on the adrenaline. I don't have anything at stake in this. Just a wild, wild ending, a fun ending, a cool moment for Drew Lock. He's clearly emotional in the post-game interview. The Seahawks playoff chances just get a shot in the arm. It jumped, I think it was down at 14% heading into the night that they make the playoffs. Now a 45% chance roughly that they make it as an NFC wild card. Obviously, San Francisco's already locked up the division, but the NFC wild card race wide the hell open. And the Eagles slink back to Philadelphia on a 3-game skid, looking very much like a team that doesn't have answers right now. I would like to suggest some for Nick Sirianni in Philadelphia. I will say credit to the Seahawks, but I can't help but go back to the Eagles' opening possession in the 4th quarter of this game. Up 4, 10 minutes to play. Like I said, Seahawks offense hasn't given you a ton of reason to stress. But what do the Eagles do? Whether it's offensive coordinator Brian Johnson, Nick Sirianni, I'm not sure. But they get a 4-play drive. 3 of those play calls are passes. And the last of them is the worst one of all, a 45-yard heave to the end zone. That's Julian Love's 1st interception. Completely changes the tenor of this game. And the Seahawks didn't even do anything with the ball, but it's a costly turnover that didn't need to happen. Run the damn ball, Eagles. It's raining. Your quarterback's sick. Take a page out of the Bills playbook from Sunday. Run the damn ball. It gives life to the crowd, and you know what that means in a building like Seattle's. I thought it was a series of decisions that opened a door that didn't need to be open. The Eagles had the lead for roughly 53 of 60 minutes on Monday night. They averaged 5 yards per carry, roughly 4.7, I think exactly, with DeAndre Swift leading the way. And despite that, and despite the fact that Jalen Hurts was sick enough to book his own flight to Seattle, they attempted 31 passes on the night. Maybe reconsider. Maybe lean into strength of this team, which is the offensive line, the run game. Jalen Hurts looked fairly mobile in this game, had some nice moments as a runner. That's what I'm pondering as the Eagles try to right this ship. And they still can. There's plenty of time. It is a 3-game losing streak, but 2 games against the New York Giants and a game against the Arizona Cardinals. There's still plenty of opportunity for them to rebound, but not until they get some answers, particularly to what's bugging them on offense. Maybe it starts with just running the damn ball and accepting that an ugly win is still a win. It served you all the way through the early stretch of the season. It feels like it's gotten away here in crunch time. It's bad news for the Birds. I'm not going to say the NFC East race is wide open, but it is certainly back in play. The Cowboys are at least temporarily on top of the division with this loss. Both teams sitting at 10-4. I can't even wrap my head around all the tiebreakers because there would be a lot of them if both teams win out. But that's still a long way away, given how the Eagles are playing right now. They need to do some soul searching, or else this snowball feels like it's going to get even bigger, regardless of how bad the opposition is heading down the home stretch. So that's maybe my thoughts to ponder for Nick Sirianni, for the Eagles offense as they try to get off this skid. But Seattle Seahawks, thank you for the unlooked for adrenaline as we move into week 16. Okay, up next, I did promise a conversation with Jared Allen, and it was a good one. Covered his aspiring curling career, not to mention his Pro Football Hall of Fame candidacy. He is a semifinalist once again this year. Really enjoyed this talk with Jared. Check it out. All right, Jared Allen, I'm excited for this. You say you're on the way to your ranch in the Nashville area. It's a beautiful Monday. Obviously been retired from the NFL for a little bit now, but this is where my head is on a Monday morning. That's when we're recording this. Just out of curiosity, thinking back to your playing days, can you take me through, it's Monday, it's mid-December, it's about to be week 16 of the NFL season. As a player, what does Monday morning feel like for you, like this late into the season when you've played this many games?
Terrible. Mondays are always terrible, right? They're just painful. I mean, maybe not as painful for these kids because we had the blessing for we had Toradol shots, and so you got the full effect come Monday. No, Mondays are painful, man. They really are. It all depends on the game, especially you get into these cold weather games outside, and it really trying to stay in that routine, right? And then bumps and bruises get even more painful if you have nothing to play for. So when you have something to play for, getting up and go getting a lift, getting the steam room, it makes it a little easier. But really, Monday mornings are a struggle. It really is. I mean, especially, up front, I think I read an article one time that's equivalent, to like a 25-mile-an-hour car crash on like every freaking Sunday, over and over and over again. Imagine running backs feel like, yeah, you try to stay in routine. That's the best thing is trying to stay in routine, try to, figure out what works best for your body. So for me, it was always trying to get up, get moving, get a little lift in, get a hot tub, get a steam room. But yeah, I mean, it takes to about, to be honest, it ain't until like Thursday after practice you start feeling like, all right, maybe I can start doing this again.
I'm grateful for that perspective. That's, like I said, it's what, 14, 15 games for these guys now. I think it's useful to keep that in mind as we move toward the playoffs. All right. To get ready for this, we can get back to football in a minute, but I just watched an interview you did recently with my friend Kay Adams, where you were on your way back from curling practice. And I think you said at the time that you had to go up to Manitoba for an event. I know, you're trying to qualify for Olympic qualifiers. How did it go in Manitoba, and where do things stand with that right now?
Yeah, we're pretty well. We lost in the quarterfinals. Probably should have made it to the semis, but so curling kind of works as like either a triple knockout or round or like pool play. So you kind of have your qualifying rounds, and then Monday or Sunday, depending on the last day, they have the playoffs, which is quarterfinals through the finals. So we ended up making the playoffs, and you get points for qualifying. You get points per win, but you get a big chunk of points for qualifying for the playoffs and stuff like that in each event. So we qualified. Picked up a good chunk of points. We ended up losing in the quarters, but we're locked in for nationals. So that's kind of our focus right now. Is just we got one more tournament coming up in Duluth here in January, and then nationals coming up out in Jersey in February. So that's where we're at. Go out there and try to win nationals at the very least podium, and then gear up for the next season. And really that 24-25 season, that those next year and a half, after this season will probably be crucial for Olympic trials. And then, qualify for Olympic trials. It depends on if they take 6 or 8 teams. And then, with that, you get to go to Italy.
So, that's incredibly cool for starters, but I'm curious. All right. So you have an event coming up in about a month. And then nationals, you said, are in February, so about 2 months. So what does the routine look like? How often do you practice? How long is a practice? I'm not sure how many people are familiar with the routine of curling.
My team is out. Everyone on my team is in Minnesota. So I just talked to Jason Smith, my guys, yesterday. They all practice together. They scrimmaged Danny Casper's team. So they scrimmaged some other teams. For me, Bulger's got a nice facility here in Nashville called T-Line, and so I try to get out there. Right now, after the last event took a couple weeks off, I'll get back this week and probably be out there almost every day, if not 3 to 4 times a week throwing rocks. So usually each practice about an hour and a half, 2 hours, depending on what I'm trying to accomplish that day. And depending on the team, if you're practicing with a team or if I bring a coach in or something like that. So it all kind of differs and varies, but I try to throw rocks as many days as possible.
Is there a skill set you picked up from a career in football that lends itself to curling? And is there something you picked up as a football player that you kind of had to unlearn as you got more into curling?
Yeah, aggression. You can't hit people in curling. You can't be aggressive in curling. It's like your short game of golf, right? It's a very finesse sport, minus sweeping, right? So I think, just being athletic and big, helps me in the sweeping category. But other than that, totally different. I think from a mentality standpoint, that's a different, curling. If you're losing by too much, you shake hands and quit. Like, that's a respectful thing. It's a very gentlemanly game. I'm not very gentlemanly, so that was hard to adjust to. It's still hard to adjust to. I want to hit people with my broom when I lose, and have a hard time, letting the winners buy me a beer. Like, that's just rubbing it in. You know what I mean?
And I'm always curious. Look, I grew up in the South. Curling is about as foreign to me as it gets. I spent very little time around ice. But yeah. I'm always struck when I watch it. It's such a quiet sport, and I'm curious. Coming from football where it's like noise all the time, and trying to ramp up the crowd to affect the offense. Like, how's that adjustment?
Yeah, well, don't get fooled. Like, it's not quiet because you're on a sheet with like 8 other teams, right? Let's say there's 4 sheets out there. You got 4 games going, so you got eight teams out there, and they're all, or even 6. A lot of times you're in 6 to 8 sheet clubs, right? So you got anywhere from 12 to 16 teams on there, and everybody's screaming at the people to sweep. Which, again, I'm not sure if you yelling at me to sweep harder is actually motivating me to sweep harder. I mean, you're accusing me of not sweeping hard then. But that's the thing of curling. Everybody yells. So on the ice, it's actually pretty loud because it's just a bunch of people screaming. And then you get to, you play over in Europe, or you play in, where people speak different languages. Then it's a whole bunch of different languages screaming, and you're just super confused. But from the standpoint of the crowd, yeah, I mean, it's like chess, right? So it's like you make a good shot and you get excited about it. Nashville's a crowd and cheer. You kind of, rile them up a little bit. But the guy behind you could make a great shot too, and your shot can be meaningless. So it's kind of like, it's the deflation. But yeah, you don't really get to play to the crowd that much because, I guess maybe when you win the whole thing, I'll belly slide down the ice if I win the whole thing.
I was gonna say, I mean, if we get you there, if we keep escalating, I mean, could we get a hog tie celebration in a curling event?
Absolutely. Yeah, sure. Absolutely. We beat Schuster. Our first game in Nationals last year, and I would have done that for that. I was pretty pumped about that. I was pretty pumped. Right. But again, it's like this whole gentleman thing, and you got like a whole week's game, so it's like people try not to overly celebrate. Where that's what's hard for me. I'm like, they try to be like, the best curlers are very just deadpan, right? Like, no emotion, almost sociopathic, to be honest with you. But I'm like, yeah, I mean, come on. If I get rubbed in someone's face after I beat them, like, what's the point?
I mean, you spend a lifetime. I mean, if you get 1 sack in a game, that's a great game. Yeah, like, you got to take your wins when you can get them, right?
Absolutely.
Speaking of which, you got a lot going on. I get it, but I'm sure you saw over the weekend Danielle Hunter passed you on the list of the Vikings all-time sack list, I suppose. As a guy that knows a thing or two about it, and I know you've been an admirer of Danielle's game for a while, but what stands out to you about it that's enabled him to get this far?
Oh, he's consistent. So I mean, when he's not hurt, he's very consistent. He's more traditional too. A lot of these guys are specialists these days, right? You see a smaller breed, 240, that hybrid linebacker DN status. Where, I mean, this dude could have played back when I came into the league, where we still had Marty Ball, right, and they're running power every day. He's that type of player. He's a 4-down player. And I think that's what I like about it. And I know he bounces around sometimes, but he predominantly plays on the the right end position. Well, I guess he plays left end a lot now. Because I know Everson was playing that right end for a while. But It's traditional. So it's nostalgic for me too, because it's a 4-3 guy, right? And so, but no, he's a technician. He can beat you in so many different ways. He can power you. He can out technique you. He's got burst, and especially in the day and age where you have a quarterback set that is running like running backs and DBs pretty much. This dude's chasing down and being successful. So big fan of his. You know, Man, I wish I would have signed my last 3 years in Minnesota and stacked those numbers a little higher, though.
I mean, it's fitting, though. And I was going to ask you next, like, okay, so it's Daniil. You obviously have a boatload of sacks. Chris Dolman is there. John Randall. Like, I know Minnesota has a crazy home field advantage, but what is it about the Vikings and producing these badass pass rushers?
No, I don't know. But go look at organizations around the league, right? There's usually one position that specific franchises are known for. And the Minnesota Vikings have been known for D linemen since, Alan Page, Carl Eller. I mean, dude, the list goes on and on. Jim Marshall, Johnny Rand, right? I mean, just the list goes on and on. Kevin and Pat Williams. And for some reason, that's just been the foundation of this franchise. And it's come from owner to owner, general manager to general manager. And I don't know the reason why. Maybe it's just because it's the North. And you're expected to be tough and play tough ball, so the emphasis has been on at least the defensive side of the ball, being able to handle business up front, and so you go look back at the history of the North, right? I mean, from the Bears to the Packers, even Detroit with Barry had a fantastic running game, so you had guys that had to be able to stop the run. And then, just transition to being able to rush the passer as well. So, yeah, I don't know the reason why, but it's a storied defensive line franchise. And so, I don't even know if I'm in the top 5 all the time there, to be honest with you. I mean, I was only there 6 years. I think, Eller's got to be ahead of me. Carl, I know Alan Page has got to be the leader. I mean, even though they weren't keeping sacks those times. Dolman, I mean, he was there how many years? Goodness. I think he's probably got over 100 with the Vikes, don't he?
Yeah, it's quite a list. I was looking at it last night. I mean, it's beyond impressive.
It's so yeah. I mean, that's the cool part too. I think especially with and I've never had a problem with anywhere, but I remember when I broke the single season record, Dolman was right there with the big grin, and really just have that kind of support and see that kind of support from fellow D linemen that you're taking their place in history and mentality, so to speak. So yeah, Daniil couldn't be a better person to pass me and to continue to climb that chain if he decides to stay there. And so yeah, I mean, again, he represents one.
Speaking of immortality, I mean, 4-time All-Pro, 5-time Pro Bowler. To some degree, I get it. This is the 4th time you're a semifinalist for the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I get it's out of your hands a little bit. I'm sure you don't love getting asked about it, but I'm curious though, when at what point in your career or when you started your career did you realize that this would be a conversation for you and that it was a goal you hoped to achieve?
Without sounding arrogant, day one. It never was to put on the gold jacket. That was never the chase. It was just to be the greatest. And I kept a list of all the people ahead of me on the sack list as a great D lineman that I watched, film on. I spent my whole time in Kansas City chasing Derek Thomas, right? And I just made that. And to be honest, my career, that was I judged my career based on Derek Thomas, on what he did and how fast he did it, and I was able to accomplish that and actually do it faster than he did. So that was kind of what always drove me, because I thought Derek Thomas was one of the greatest ever to play this game, and unfortunately he was cut short. And I think he's probably pushing that 200 number if he continued to play for another 5, even 6 years. I mean, that could do was insane. But I was able to learn a lot from him watching this film. But yeah, I mean, that was always how I challenged myself: is how can I measure myself against greatness? And so that was my goal from day one. And again, the gold jacket, it wasn't like, oh, Hall of Fame was the answer, right? It was about winning Super Bowls. Coach Vermeil told me my rookie year, he was like, the best way you help our team, I'll never forget, I let a play go through the B gap, right? Let the linebacker get it. I could have fall back and made the tackle for, probably 2 yards or something like that. And he was like, make every play possible. He's like, the best way you help our team is by being the best defensive end you can be. He's like, football is an individual sport. He's like, if all 11 individuals win their battles, we'll be a hell of a team. And I'll never forget that conversation. And that's what drove me, was just chase these guys down, because I figured if I could catch them, right, just like, practicing against Willie Roaf, I figured if I could beat Willie Roaf, I could beat everybody else. So if I can catch these guys, if I can do what these guys did, I'll have a heck of a career, and I'll be able to when I'm done, hold my head up high and know I did the right way. So, yeah. So from day one, that was always the goal, is just chase down greatness.
Well, I think you did a phenomenal job, man. I'll be rooting for you when that time comes this year. One last thing, look, and I know you get asked a lot of questions about it, and your mullet competition does a great job raising money for your Homes for Wounded Warriors Foundation. But like, you were doing the mullet thing. I mean, look, I just turned 35. I remember watching you when I was a hell of a lot younger. And like, you were doing the mullet thing way before it was cool. And now like Gen Z is trying to claim it for themselves. Like, what do you think about this like mullet renaissance that's going on right now?
It wasn't a fad. I mean, the flow is still strong, as you can see. We're just out here. We're just out here living it. And I can't take credit for it. The Boz had it way before me. Billy Ray Cyrus was crushing it. Which Billy Ray, I mean, if you're listening, you should go back to it, bro. Don't sleep on what got you where you're at. I mean, think about the generations. I mean, goodness. I mean, you could go back to the 80s. I mean, Rick Springfield crushing it. I mean, Stamos. I mean, go back to it, bro.
The classics are classics for a reason, right?
That's what I'm saying. So yeah, I'm excited when the younger generation takes off. You know what? I do get a laugh out of it though, because everybody tries to like trash it up. You know what I mean? At some point though, you got to class it, right? That's what I like seeing in the competition. I like seeing when someone throws on a suit. Let's take the mullet to corporate America. We can make some serious changes then, right? You get some mullet wearing CEOs out there, pros. Man, it's gonna be good. I'm waiting for the president to have a mullet. Then it's just like, boom, world power again.
That's the America I want to live in. Maybe in time for the 2026 Olympics, which hopefully we will be watching you at. Look, yeah. Jared, I could talk to you all day, man. But I'm gonna make it a goal for 2024 to get to a curling event. And man, I can't tell you how much I appreciate the time. Hopefully we'll catch up with you again.
Absolutely. You guys have a good one. Merry Christmas.
Quickly, let's get into some news and notes coming out of the weekend, and there is plenty of it. As usual, a lot of it injury-related. For starters, Jaguars quarterback Trevor Lawrence is in concussion protocol after Sunday's loss to Baltimore. Doug Peterson mentioned that after the game. He's getting looked at for a potential concussion. Something to bear monitoring as the Jags travel to play Tampa this weekend. We'll just keep an eye on it this week as the Jaguars work through their schedule. Elsewhere, Cincinnati Bengals star receiver Jamar Chase is expected to miss, quote, some time with the separated shoulder he suffered in the Bengals win against Minnesota on Saturday afternoon. Sounds like he's going to miss this weekend's game against Pittsburgh, and it could be more than that. Like I always say, the later you get in the season, even a couple weeks is a big deal. Sounds like Jake Browning's going to need T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd to step up once again for the Bengals. Sticking in the AFC North, Baltimore Ravens running back Keaton Mitchell confirmed to miss the rest of the season with a torn ACL. Unfortunately, it looked pretty obvious the minute he went down Sunday against Jacksonville that this was going to be the case. Just a gnarly looking fall. He clearly looked distressed leaving the game. I hate it for him. He's one of the most exciting rookies in the NFL right now. Tough break for the Ravens running back room as well. They've already lost J.K. Dobbins for the season. So it's all eyes on Gus Edwards and Justice Hill on the roster. And remember, Melvin Gordon is on the Ravens practice squad as well. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets moved up to the roster as the week goes. Speaking of running backs, good news for the Kansas City Chiefs. Kansas City head coach Andy Reid says he expects Isaiah Pacheco back for Kansas City's Christmas Day game against the Las Vegas Raiders. Could be a big boost. I mean, not just for the offense, but really the Chiefs' whole running back room. Like we said yesterday, Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Jerick McKinnon both had really nice days against New England. So running back room in KC all of a sudden looking really strong. Up in Pittsburgh, Steelers head coach Mike Tomlin announced that Mason Rudolph is going to start Saturday against the Cincinnati Bengals. Rudolph takes over for Mitchell Trubisky, who struggled once again in the loss to the Colts. Rudolph will be the Steelers' third starter this year as they try to salvage some hopes of a playoff appearance without Kenny Pickett. And let's wrap it up with the Steelers. Maybe the most nuanced story coming out of the weekend. Veteran safety DeMonte Casey has officially been suspended for the rest of the season after that scary hit on Colts receiver Michael Pittman Jr. on Saturday afternoon. the NFL cited, quote, repeated violations in the decision to suspend him. It's interesting enough in its own right. You lose a veteran starter for the home stretch of the season. Mike Tomlin said he knows KZ isn't a dirty player, but he understands that in this day and age, the onus is 100% on defenders not to make these types of decisions. It's true. But the interesting twist to the story is what happened when the news came out, which is that none other than the GOAT, Tom Brady, maybe you've heard of him, weighed in on the news on Instagram. So it's a long comment. You can go read it for yourself if you haven't seen it. But the gist of it is basically Brady said to put all of the blame on a defender in a situation like this is just flat out wrong. It's not okay for quarterbacks to throw receivers into situations like that. It's not okay to get your wide receivers hit because of your bad decisions. Personally, I get Brady's point. I do get it. The rules of the league right now are just insanely tilted toward offense, insanely tilted toward scoring points, getting touchdowns, fantasy football, all that stuff. And I do think it has emboldened quarterbacks to make throws that put their receivers in compromising positions because it's worth the risk. You're either going to get the completion or you're going to get a flag. It's a weekly occurrence for an offensive series or drive to continue because a defender made a big hit, usually a legal hit, in my opinion. Ref hears the loud noise, sees a scary collision, throws a flag, and a drive that would have stalled continues. I'd love to see it if the league would make this stuff reviewable so that when there is a bad decision or when there is a legal hit, you can look at it, restore some semblance of physicality on the defensive side of the ball. Having said all of that, having just come to Tom Brady's defense, I'm just not sure this is the play to get upset about. And I don't want to insinuate that Damontae Kazee is a dirty player, but I just think in 2023, your hands are tied. And at this point, you should know it. You've either got to try to make a play on that ball, or at the very least, you touch the guy down when he hits the ground and move on to the next play. Yeah, I know that's going to rub some people the wrong way. I know that's not the way that the Steel Curtain played back in the day when the Steelers were winning all those Super Bowls, but that's the game right now, and we all know that. And so I'm not sure this was the one. This was the play that should draw that kind of outrage. There are plenty of them where you say, man, what's the guy supposed to do? I think in this instance, it's pretty obvious what Damontae Kazee was supposed to do. Not sure if it's worth a suspension, but it's definitely a flag and maybe not worthy of the book length Instagram comment in this case. But in general, I do get Tom Brady's point. I do get your point if you're a fan of defense. As we like to do so often on Tuesdays, we're going to check in with a division that was particularly interesting in week 15. I swear we don't do this on purpose, but we are going to bring in our guy, Ben Arthur, once again, Fox Sports AFC South writer. What division is more compelling than the AFC South right now? Three teams in the thick of the division race. Houston and Indianapolis get big wins over the weekend to narrow the gap on the Jacksonville Jaguars. Drama abounds in the AFC South, which is just not something we saw coming. So let's bring in Ben Arthur to talk about it all right now. All right, Ben, it's been shaping up this way for a little bit now. We are officially in a dead heat. The Jacksonville Jaguars, that big lead, or it felt like a big lead at least, it has evaporated here over the last 3 weeks, and the AFC South has 3 8-6 teams vying for playoff contention. So we could start with the Jags. They are still technically in first place, and we'll get there. But I want to start with the darling team of the NFL on Fox Podcast this season. That's the Houston Texans. They find a way to get it done in Tennessee. Maybe not the prettiest game of their season, but you know what? It doesn't matter. It's a win, and it gives them a week to try to get CJ Stroud back into the lineup. Do you see that as a possibility for this week? I guess let's start there.
Yeah, I imagine it would be a possibility as of today when we're recording. CJ is still in concussion protocol. That's what D'Amico Ryans told reporters on Monday, but I imagine he has a good chance to play this week. I mean, we have seen more serious concussions, like even in my own division, like the Titans receiver Treylon Burks missed about three or four games with a concussion. So it is possible for those kinds of injuries to kind of like prolong. But I think in most cases we've seen guys be able to come back after missing one game. So I imagine that's in the plan. I mean, the Texans would obviously hope for that to be the case too. Case Keenum came up big for them this weekend in Nashville, but you would certainly love to have your QB1 back. So I guess it's kind of still wait and see for the Texans at this point.
I couldn't help but think about you in the home stretch of this game. Not a very memorable one. It kind of looked like not having CJ was gonna sink them in the end, and then they kind of catch fire there at the end for two scoring drives in the last 15 or 20 minutes of the game. I know you're working on a story about D'Amico Ryans and how he's kind of changed the culture there to rally behind a backup quarterback. And I know Case Keenum has played a lot of games in this league, but just given the guys they've lost here over the last few weeks, not having their quarterback, what do you think it said about what D'Amico Ryans has done there that they were able to rally and keep their playoff hopes afloat?
Yeah, I think it says a number of things, Dave. I think number one, it really speaks to the depth of this Texans team, right? Like they weren't only down CJ Stroud, but they were without Nico Collins. We know Tank Dell is on IR. He's out for the season. They're without their top off-ball linebacker and Blake Cashman. They were without Will Anderson, who's really their number two edge rusher. They're without their right tackle. They were without one of their better defensive backs. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And they were able to get this massive win in Nashville. And so I think that really speaks to their depth. I mean, Noah Brown is a guy who had shown at times to be productive for them. And without Nico and Tank Dell, I mean, he really showed out. And then Dalton Schultz came up big for them too. And then Devin Singletary, the running back, he's really become RB1 for Houston. So he came up big as well. But I think more than anything, Dave, I mean, this really shows the work that D'Amico Ryans has done with this defense. I think from the start of the year that they'd shown improvements from what was last season a disaster. But I think as the year has worn on, they've continued to get better and better. And they're really the primary reason they won this game. I mean, Derrick Henry is a guy who has gone bonkers on them for years. He's had multiple 200-yard rushing games against them, and he only had 9 rushing yards on 16 carries, his worst rushing performance as a Titans starter. Really bottled him up. They bottled up DeAndre Hopkins. They sacked Will Levis 7 times. I know the Titans O-line has a lot of issues, but sacking him 7 times was huge. Derek Stingley showed out. To have the defense play like this in December, when you know you don't have CJ, you don't have a lot of those offensive fireworks, so to speak, in terms of your talent on that side of the ball, and to have that side of the ball really elevate and rise to the occasion in kind of a must-win game at this point in the season, I think really speaks wonders about kind of what D'Amico Ryans has done.
A must-win game, and also it had to have felt so good to get a win over the Titans when they were wearing those Oilers uniforms. Like what a petty move by Tennessee, and I think it's fair to say it kind of backfired for him on Sunday.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, D'Amico Ryans didn't want to like address like if like the fact that the Titans were wearing the Oilers throwbacks added any motivation. I mean, you wouldn't expect anything less from just D'Amico, and usually coaches will kind of play it that way. But yeah, no doubt about it that they kind of felt some type of way about it. I know a lot of Houston fans were upset about it too.
For
it was
sure.
all over. Yeah, it was all over social media and just in the city of Houston too. So yeah, it felt especially good. And then we saw the Texans social media, they kind of clapped back They've been really good at that this season, by the way, just in terms of clapping back at teams who, try to make them seem small, but then they get the win. And then like within 5 minutes, they put out a tweet and the Texans did the same thing. Like they quote tweeted a tweet the Texans had about just wearing the Oilers throwbacks and so it was just kind of fun. But yeah, I know it really fired them up to be able to do it, to be able to do what they did with the Titans wearing those jerseys.
You know what? After the 4 or 5 years that the Texans have had, even if they don't make the playoffs, like good, enjoy your football. That's supposed to be the point. So I'm glad the Texans at least have that going for them, no matter what happens next. All right, let's check in with the team that's technically still leading the division, but it feels like the vibes go from bad to worse with the Jags. I mean, Trevor Lawrence, he already had the ankle injury. He is now also being evaluated for a concussion. On top of that, just an ugly night against Baltimore on Sunday. Had turnover issues. The defense, once again, maybe not standing up as strongly as you'd prefer. Can you picture a way? And I mean, I know we won't know what Trevor's situation is for at least a few days, so I get that. But can you picture a way going to play Tampa Bay next? Like, how can the Jags attempt to right the ship? I mean, it's not just that they're losing games, but they're losing them in untenable fashion here, in the home stretch of the season.
Yeah, that's it, Dave. Like the fact that this is happening in the home stretch of the season where those elite teams, those contending teams should be playing their best ball at this point in the year, and the Jags are literally playing their worst ball, and the way they've been losing has been quite baffling. Just in that Ravens game on Sunday Night Football, they were in they went to Ravens territory 5 times and they had no points to show for it. Missed field goals even before Trevor Lawrence, it was revealed that he was in concussion protocol after the game, but just the
Right.
way he played it was just kind of, if you're a Jags fan, you couldn't maybe help but just rip your hair out just with kind of the stuff that happened, like the lost fumble in the red zone, and he wasn't even touched. He just straight up just dropped the ball on a scramble inside the 20, and then the extremely poor situational awareness at the end of the first half. That
Oof.
was, I mean, that's just very elementary, and for a team with the talent that it has, and for Trevor Lawrence, what he's supposed to be, to kind of make those kinds of mistakes, they're inexcusable. And then, as you touched on, the defense has had issues too, a lot of ups and downs outside of Josh Allen. Yeah, it just kind of feels like the Jags are fading at exactly the wrong time. Doug Peterson, when he spoke after the Sunday night game, it was like the most like he just looked baffled, like he didn't have answers. He took much longer to speak to reporters than he had at like any other point this year. And I think it's really interesting because Doug Peterson said this last week, and Josh Allen actually said it today, that they both indicated how in practice they're not as sharp as they need to be. Like, Doug had been asked about like the pre-snap penalties that keep happening, and Doug was basically like, and again, this last week he was like, yeah, they keep showing up in practice, so I'm not surprised this is happening in the game. And then Josh Allen was also talking about how the execution isn't quite there, and it's like, this is week 6, we're in week 16 now, right? Like, this cannot be happening with a team that has this much talent. For this just to be happening, it's really hard to understand. And it just, even if they do still kind of get into the playoffs at this point, I don't know how you could look at this team and feel that they have any run in them at this point. And again, there's still a lot of football left, but not confident.
There's not that much football left, Ben.
Yeah.
Like, I know I say that every week, but with with each passing week, you look at it and you're like, man, three games ain't a ton. And I know it's our job to make sense of all of this, but I think you're right. Like, I think the Jags basically are a team that should be better than they are. And I think that applies to Trevor Lawrence. I think that applies to the skill players. It is, I mean, it's a tough break to lose Christian Kirk, obviously. You can't game plan for that. I know they've had offensive line issues, but we've seen the defense play to a higher level of ability than what we've seen over the last 2-3 weeks. Like, whether you want to blame coaching, whether you want to blame the players themselves, that's all I can think watching Trevor Lawrence recently is like, I know you're a good player. I see you do like 5 things per game that almost no one else in the league can do. But for whatever the reason, the consistency just doesn't match it with this team. I don't know where you lay the blame, but I mean, I don't think you have to think about it harder than that.
Yeah, it's kind of all over the place, Dave, like just in terms of that blame. And again, this we're in week 16 now. If we're still talking about how they still can't seem to put it together, it's just who they are, right? This is just who the Jags are, unfortunately, in their case. I mean, we entered the season with very high expectations with what they were able to do at the end of last year. They were a game from getting to the AFC Championship game, and they were expected to really hit the stratosphere this year. And it's just these kind of little. It seems like all these little details every game, and in a lot of cases, it's the same mistakes that keep happening week in and week out. It's frustrating, and like I said, I think it's just who the Jags are, and we'll see if they could kind of get through these last 3 weeks and still kind of get in the playoffs.
Can't say I'm optimistic, but yeah, I mean, 3 games is enough time to turn it around, I guess, especially in a division as competitive as this one. But I'm with you. I can't say I feel super optimistic. All right. Wasn't Sunday, it was Saturday. The Indianapolis Colts go down early and then just jump all over the Pittsburgh Steelers to climb up to 8-6, firmly in the middle of the playoff race. Despite, I mean, they're more surprising than the Houston Texans, right? Like, that's not a crazy statement just because the Texans have D'Amico and Will Anderson and CJ Stroud. Like, I don't know where to start with the Colts, which is why I want to talk about this guy, because I remember last time you came on, we talked about the Colts need Jonathan Taylor back. Well, they don't get him. And then Zach Moss goes out. And then lo and behold, here is Trey Sermon, who was like an afterthought in the league after, he had this fun college career. I thought he was going to catch on in San Francisco and Philadelphia. Doesn't seem like it's ever going to happen for the guy. And then he is like one of the catalysts for this Colts offense. What was the reaction with the Colts when Trey Sermon kind of made his stamp on the season on Saturday afternoon?
Yeah, and honestly, Dave, it wasn't just him too. It was Tyler Goodson, who also had, I think, close to 70 yards and above 5 yards per carry. Together, they had close to 160 on the ground. Goodson was elevated from the practice squad. He's a practice squad player coming up big. And then to kind of take it further, just with the backups, Michael Pittman Jr. obviously got knocked out of the game early with that hit from DeMonte Kazee. And DJ Montgomery, who probably no one knows of, what was their leading receiver when he left the game, and he was signed from the practice squad just 2 days prior, and he had a touchdown. He was their leading receiver, not named Michael Pittman Jr. And just to see these backups play the way they did, I think it says a lot about the coaching of this Colts team, of what Shane Steichen has done in spite of all the issues they've had and the injuries and the up and down quarterback play and the Jonathan Taylor situation. And they've been without their right tackle for most of the season. They've had cornerback issues all year. One of their best defensive players in Grover Stewart missed 6 games due to a suspension, and they're just right in this, man. They're actually the hottest team in the AFC South. They've won 5 of their last 6 games. It's really an incredible. I just keep thinking about just the job that Shane Steichen has done. I mean, Kevin Stefanski is maybe a lot of people's coach of the year at this point, just with everything they've been through, like their 4th string quarterback essentially. But right after him, and I know D'Amico's in the conversation as well, but I would put Shane Steichen right up there. I mean, everything they've endured, and the Colts still have a top 8 scoring offense. They're putting up nearly 25 points a game in spite of everything that's gone on. And it's like the Colts just find a different way to win every game. It's never pretty. It doesn't look, it's not aesthetically pleasing. But they just seem to find a way somehow, some way. And it's really impressive. So I don't, yeah, the Colts are impressive.
But there's no better word for it. I mean, Kevin Stefanski is doing a wonderful job in Cleveland. Don't get me wrong, but I look at it, and even knowing all the things the Browns don't have, and it's a long list, but you can still pull that defense out as like a trump card and say, well, okay, at the end of the day, this defense has largely been healthy, at least up until the last couple of weeks. You got Myles Garrett on that side of the ball. I mean, I know Zaire Franklin's a hell of a linebacker, but you like that's about it as far as star power goes on this Colts defense. And yeah, man, they find a way on both sides of the ball. I think, not that I have a vote, but if I had one, I'm thinking it goes to Shane Steichen right now.
Yeah, no, it has to. Yeah, I mean, just as you kind of say that, yeah, I mean, Shane Steichen is definitely in my top 2 for sure in terms of coach of the year candidates. And um yeah, I mean, I don't know what else to say, Dave. I mean, I'm
No,
literally, yeah.
hey, Ben, you don't have to say anything else. That sums up the Colts perfectly. Is you just kind of scratch your head and you're like,
Exactly.
I don't really know what to make of this, but they're
Yeah.
2 games above 500 with a hell of a good shot to make the playoffs. So, I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot too much, but this is about as good of a division race as there is coming down to the very end. I mean, I guess the NFC South is entertaining in its own ways, but those teams are struggling to stay above 500. You
Yeah.
got 3 8-6 teams here in the AFC South. I guess if CJ Stroud is coming back, I'll probably ride with the Texans. How do you feel about that decision on my part?
Yeah, honestly, of the 3, I feel the most optimistic about the Texans. I mean, like we talked about, it feels like the Jags are falling apart. The Colts, I just don't. I mean, again, they've continually proved me wrong. Like, I didn't think we'd be talking about them in this way at this point. I always felt like that they, at some point, like their lack of talent or whatever was going to catch up to them, but they're still in this point. They're still at this point. But I just think because of the quarterback play, not knowing for sure what you get out of Gardner Minshew week in and week out holds them back, especially as we get closer to the playoffs. And we know what CJ is capable of. We've seen him put the Texans on his back and just orchestrate, engineer something incredible. And have it, knowing that fact on top of a defense, as I said, that has continued to grow, a depth of this team that showed more than ever in Nashville this past week to eliminate the Titans from playoff contention. When they get CJ back and Nico Collins presumably will be back as well as Will Anderson Jr. and Blake Cashman. Like, I just think with what these Texans have proved to be on top of what we know CJ to be, I just feel really good about them these last 3 weeks, probably more so than the other 2 teams. So,
I can't wait to see how it all shapes up. And I mean, if the race itself wasn't good enough, this week 16 is going to be huge for all three of them. I believe, what is it? The Jags go on the road to face the division leading Buccaneers. The Colts are on the road at the Falcons, who are trying to save their season. And then you've got the Texans hosting the Browns, who have a winning record and are looking like the 5 seed in the playoffs. So all three of these teams playing very big games in week 16. It's going to be fascinating. And Ben, as usual, don't be surprised if we call you back to break it all down next week. I always appreciate these chats, man. Thanks a lot.
No problem, Dave. Thanks for having me.
All right, we're officially done with week 15. We turn the focus toward Christmas weekend, Christmas Eve games, Christmas Day games, so much to look forward to. And let's start it off with an early present. That would be the week 16 power rankings. What better way to get ready for the holiday than to argue with your friends and family about the arbitrary place that your team holds on the board? Let's get right into it like we always do. I like the way we did this last week. We're in the end game now. There's only 3 games to play. We're going to focus on the contenders, on the teams with a shot. We don't need to dwell on the bottom of the board right now. So let's start it out in the middle of the pack with a team that I'm just deeply disappointed in at number 18, down 3 spots from last week. That would be the Green Bay Packers, who fall at Lambeau to Tampa Bay. Packers. The Bucs had only managed 350 yards of offense twice this year. Heading into your game, you gave up 450, 34 points. Let the Buccaneers move the ball at will. We have talked for 2 years now about all the first round picks on this defense. I know they haven't all been healthy always at the same time, but there's too much talent there for this little production. This was a team that was a sneaky favorite to be a playoff spoiler. And now their playoff hopes not dead, but looking awfully dim. I completely understand why Joe Barry's seat in Green Bay feels red hot right now, keeping an eye on the defensive coordinator situation heading into the final 3 games. Packers, I'm so disappointed. Speaking of that, let's just keep it at Lambeau Field. The team that beat them up a couple spots from last week, that would be the Buccaneers, sitting at number 14. Baker Mayfield take a bow, a perfect passer rating on the road at Lambeau Field. I think the guy's been playing well all season long. Certainly better than the Bucs record indicates. I have a feeling, as long as we don't see a total collapse here, I think Baker Mayfield is on the roster in 2024. I think he's their starter heading into next season. He's been more than good enough. Maybe you draft a guy that you can develop, but Baker Mayfield, I think, has earned the right to be the guy moving forward based on performances like this. And the Buccaneers on top of the NFC South, plenty more work to do. But after it just felt like they took a 5-week hiatus from the spotlight, they are back in a big way just in time for postseason contention. Let's keep it pushing. At number 7, I moved the Cleveland Browns up 1 spot from last week. We're not going to overreact to a miracle win against the Bears. Took every effort to come back from a 10-point deficit in the 4th quarter. They almost lost it on a Hail Mary, but it's a big deal to me because 1, it assures the Browns a winning record. I did a whole spiel about that on the Monday show. Number 2, the end of it shows you the best of what the Browns can be. If Joe Flacco can avoid the turnovers that we saw early, he's good enough. He can score you enough points that this defense can do the rest. That's what we saw down the home stretch. If the Browns can keep that formula clicking, this isn't a team that I would want to play in the playoffs. I certainly think they are a top 10 team, better than a top 10 team. Couple spots up from them. The Dallas Cowboys take a little bit of a tumble, down 4 spots to number 5. I was conflicted about what to do with Dallas and Philly after the big loss to Buffalo. Philly kind of bailed me out with that loss in Seattle. I put the Cowboys at 5. Yes, super embarrassing loss to the Buffalo Bills. Yes, they got to do something about the run defense. Yes, they got to learn how to play on the road. But I look at it, they just beat the brakes off of Philadelphia. That still counts. That game still happened. And I like the Cowboys' odds against just about everybody ranked behind them. Yeah, I will admit, feels a little weird seeing KC all the way up there at number 9, but the way that offense is stopping and starting, I don't feel guilty about letting them hang out back there for the time being. The Cowboys are still a top 5 team in the NFL, even if they have some work to do to prove that they're better than that. They fell short in Buffalo, still plenty of opportunities against the likes of the Dolphins and the Lions before the playoffs start. Then there's the team that beat them, the Buffalo Bills at number 3, up 2 spots from last week. I've got an 8-6 team at the 3 spot. I said it after Sunday's games. San Francisco and Baltimore are the only teams in the league that I feel remotely confident could beat the Bills right now. And wouldn't you know it, that's exactly how I've got the board. Defense is coming together after some injuries. Josh Allen is playing like the badass that he is. They found their run game. Yeah, I got a little bit of a crush on the Buffalo Bills. I don't feel bad about it. And let's just give some love. I dropped the Ravens for no good reason last week. I bumped them into the 2 spot, handled business. You go on the road and beat a division leader by 16 while not playing all that flashy. I'd say you're a pretty damn good team. I'd say you deserve the 2 spot. I'd say I can't wait for Christmas night. I'm sorry to my friends and family. Whatever presents are coming my way in real life, all I need is Ravens and Niners on Christmas night. Guess what? We're all going to get it. I can't wait. San Francisco, Baltimore, 2 very deserving top 2 teams to round out our power rankings. We will see how that changes the next time we do this show. But that wraps us up for now. This was a fun one. Fun week. I'm sure it's only going to get better as the holidays arrive. We will be back this week to preview all of the Christmas action. We'll have you covered over the weekend. We are your one-stop shop for all things NFL, and that's why you should go subscribe on Spotify. You should go find us on Apple Podcasts. We have a YouTube channel. Wherever you get your podcasts, wherever you get your NFL news, you can find us. We appreciate it so much, y'all. I hope you're having a happy holiday season. I hope you're done working for the year or close to it. Or if you are working, I hope you're going to keep it right here and follow along for all your latest on the NFL on Fox podcast. Yeah, I think I said everything. Happy holidays. I'll catch y'all next time.